Okay, over to you, John, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Okay. So good morning to my brothers and sisters. So I'll be discussing, maybe leading the last 8 essays of chapter 11. The last 8 essays deals with thus I've heard, O ignorant disciple, the human condition, fail today, succeed tomorrow, special form of service, the audience vertical ascent, compassion is more than a virtue, and the pilgrim has returned. And I'll have a summary at the end. And then if we have concluding comments or questions, we can ask. But while I go through each of these essays, there will be opportunities for all of us to participate in what we think these passages imply or mean. So when we go to the first one, thus I've heard, it came from the Voice of the Silence, verse 119. The first repeat in pride, behold, I know the last, they who in humbleness have granted, low confess, thus I've heard. That there's a difference between experts. I mean, in the physical world, you can be an expert in, let's say, computer repairs, expert in maybe computer programming, but these are topics or knowledge that are normally observable. You can demonstrate them empirical, and that they are normally gained through observation, study, and experience. And they say that all of us can be experts in one area, provided we devote a lot of our energies in that field. However, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. So the wisdom comes from mindful application of knowledge to our daily actions, and is normally considered to be one of the supreme goals of human existence. So normally when theosophists deliver lectures on topics of some degree, we don't call them experts. They will just say, thus I've heard, rather than please listen to me, I know. There's a book with the title, Thus I've Heard, written by Jeffrey Hodgson. And in the preface of that book, it says, the information contained in these talks does not originate from me. I have only attempted to hand on to my fellow students the teachings which our elders in the spiritual life have so freely given to us in these days, hence to use as a title of the ancient formula, thus have I heard. Also, Sri Madhashi said that as seekers of truth, what have we really garnered from our seeking? If it is only head learning, it has limited utility. All that we have heard about God, the Spirit, the Atma, the void, derives at its best from the other people's experience. It may be their knowledge, but it is not ours. And that is why we are still seekers and not finders. So the question, what are some other reasons why lecturers of the TS are not introduced as experts? And anybody can answer or make the comments. What came to my mind is that when we look at the constitution of humanity, of a human being, there are several levels. Now, the experts might have knowledge, maybe in the physical plane, might be emotional, even mental. But then on the spiritual plane, the intuitional plane, they don't have that knowledge, and you need special instruments to explore those states of consciousness. And we are all different levels of consciousness. So, I mean, we can never say that, okay, we have reached or we are experts in this. Okay, now let's go to the
John,
next. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say something about that too. And that is sometimes when we introduce people as experts, it can lead to authoritarianism, you know what I mean? Authority. We think they're the authority. And so we might tend to dismiss our own knowing or our own intuition because they say, well, maybe I don't know because they've studied it. They really know. So we can have a wider berth in learning if we are in communication with this other person, you know, psychically and energetically, rather than looking up to them as the person that knows.
Thank you. Any other comments, observations?
The person that say that I know is mean that you experience it. Most of us are just learn from the book. So we can't say that we know because we've not experienced that.
Okay, thanks. So let's go to the next.
Yeah, for my feedback on this one, John, it's like it's like a map, right? Somebody give you a map. They tell you what it's like, how to travel that road, but it's up to you to travel that road. Until you actually travel that road, you know, you're not really an expert. You know about it, you know the path, but you're not walking the path yet. So you know, the so-called expert, they have to walk that path. They have to know what the experience is like, and they share the experience with us. So they can give you the map, but it's up to each one of us to walk that path so that we will eventually become that expert.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to the next essay. The next essay comes from verse 113. But even ignorance is better than head learning with no soul wisdom to illuminate and guide it. And then it goes on to say that although compassion is a predominant theme of the voice of the silence, ignorance holds a distinction of being mentioned at the very onset. At the beginning of the book, it says, these instructions are for those ignorant of the dangers of the lower id. And then it goes on, yet before the aspirant can initiate this transformation, he must recognize and deal with his own ignorance. And then in several verses in the Voice of Silence, verse 18, it says, this earth, O ignorant disciple, is by this dismal entrance leading to the twilight that precedes the valley of true light, that light which no wind can extinguish. Verse 24, the name of the first hall is ignorance, avidya, and that the hall of ignorance is a metaphor for the preliminary stage of the path, wherein the disciples advised not to succumb to the false allure of earthly illusions. So if faced the possibility of misusing this knowledge so that others will come to harm, it is preferable for the aspirant to remain in the state of relative ignorance until he has developed the necessary power of discernment. And that the spirit of ahimsa, that do no harm, trumps the desire to know, especially when that thirst for knowledge is driven by short-sighted and self-serving considerations. So the question is, why is ignorance better than head learning with no soul wisdom to illuminate and guide it?
Yeah, I wanted to comment and just say that when they use in the East, they use the word ignorant, they usually don't mean somebody's stupid. They really mean the lack of knowledge. That means if you have not been informed, you know, it's better for you not to be informed than to misuse the information. And so ignorance has a different connotation in the West. So I know that I've used the word ignorance in the Eastern philosophy, and somebody said, oh my gosh, you're really being judgmental. And I'm saying, no, I just mean that they don't know yet. You know, they haven't learned. So just wanted to put that in the mix.
So you're saying ignorant is the definition of unawareness, right? Being unaware of something.
Or uninformed.
Okay.
Both.
So in this particular question, we're asking whether or not it is better to be ignorant or better to possess the knowledge and but don't have the compassion. Is that what it's saying? No soul wisdom?
Well, it's saying, why is it better not to have the facts or to be aware of something than to just have the words and have no meaning behind the words, to not have the experience, they're just empty words. And it's
another way of also looking at it is if you have if you have the knowledge, but you don't have any intuition respect to how the knowledge should be used, then you can cause more harm than good.
It's kind of like possessing the power, but misusing the power.
I guess you can think of it that way.
Because this last section of the essay seemed to imply that if you have the knowledge but you lack the compassion, you could be harming other people. Then it's not worth it to gain that knowledge and harm people in the process.
I think maybe last time when one of those essays was discussed, they said that when we speak, it should be true, kind, and helpful. So we can have the knowledge, but it might not be kind, it might not be helpful, but no, we just say it. So I think the compassionate part should be part of whatever we do. Okay, let's go to the next essay. The next essay is on human condition. So verse 36 says, behold the host of souls, watch how they hover over the stormy sea of human life, and how exhausted, bleeding, broken winged, they drop one after another on the swelling waves. So anyway, this verse alludes to suffering. And the Four Noble Truths, the first one is life is suffering. And the first of the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha recognizes the existence and pervasiveness of suffering. And the author thinks that this verse 36 gives a very powerful dramatization of the truth that life is suffering. Also, in the Epistle of Saint Cyprian, a Christian theologian of the 3rd century, it says, "For a brief space, conceive yourself to be transported to one of the loftiest peaks of some inaccessible mountain. Then gaze on the appearances of things lying below you, and with eyes turned in various directions, look upon the eddies of the billowy world, while you yourself are removed from earthly contacts. You will at once begin to feel compassion for the world." So the picture you see to your right is the flood, picture of the flood that flooding in Houston during one of the hurricanes. And you can imagine how much suffering it brought to us. So the author believes that the intended effect of verse 36 of the voice of the silence is to arouse compassion for those who suffer. And that fortunately we grow through successive incarnations, learning from our mistakes, and the words of Milton, gaining knowledge of good but dear by knowing ill. So, any comments on our human condition?
I have a question though.
Yes.
So we see the human condition around us and so many people suffering. How do we show compassion? I mean, I know how we show compassion when it's a family, yes, and a friend. But on a humanity basis, is it just sending prayers? Volunteering to help? I don't know. Does anybody have insights on that?
Let's say you do the best you can. So if you have to pray, you pray. If you have send good thoughts, if you have money to send, you send. Do the best you can. But I guess, I mean, some of my other brothers and sisters might have other comments on that.
Isn't theosophy teach us that the way through that is through service, by helping others?
We
So
have a Houston Compassion Society or something, right? Compassionate Houston or something like that.
Yes, the Houston Lodge is the one of the founding member for that Houston Compassion. Yes, Farley actually forwarded that information to me.
Yeah, that's Karen Armstrong, and it's an international effort with many people joining. But I do want to say, I'm thinking when we're talking about compassion, that we go back to times when people really didn't understand what compassion was. And different spiritual leaders like Zoroaster, which was like 5000 BC, he was developing the idea of compassion. And that was different from me, this is mine. It's a way, it's not just about the action, but it's developing the quality of compassion within ourselves. For example, there are a lot of people that look at people on welfare and they're not compassionate. They say, oh, they're just taking. They don't want to work. Well, that's not compassion. They're not looking at the person. They're dehumanizing. So I think compassion first, and you probably, Shanti, you don't have any problem with that because you already developed that quality of compassion. But when we're talking about spiritual characteristics, we're talking about really developing first that quality of compassion with everything that we see. And it was a good visual, John, that picture of Houston. I mean, you think, who could not look on that and see compassion? But some people look at it and say, yeah, everybody's going to try to milk everything they can out of the government, and go on with that dialogue. So I believe that it starts with this removal of judgment and moving into the heart or the essence of compassion ourselves.
Thank you for that, Anne. So it's like really shifting our perspective and how we see things, right?
Yeah, and when we do that, normally we're intuitive enough to respond to the events that the universe puts in our space. We don't have to go hunting for these things. These things appear for us to be involved in. And we can, if there is a point in which we can live compassion in action. I mean, many of us have been walking down the street and we see a poor person and we think, I want to give this person money. And we do. Another person walks in and says, man, I'm not giving them anything. But we are called to do that. You know, whether that person is going to take that money and use it on drugs, whatever, we were called in that moment to do it. And so we do it. And that is our compassionate act.
Thank you.
Yeah, to me, compassion is an attitude. It's the mindset or the attitude of being helpful to other people, no matter whether or not they deserve it or not. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad. As long as your attitude, you keep your attitude and your mindset to help other people. That's what it means to be compassionate toward other.
May I go back to the Four Noble Truths? Here, the word craving was used as opposed to attachment. And I have always struggled with that. Without craving, there would be no inventions, human life would not improve, and I would be a lazy bum because why crave anything? And so any comments on that to clarify?
Maybe craving versus desires. A desire and craving. So every word has, I mean, it has a yin and a yang, right? So staying in the center, it's anything that's excessive, it's not good. So craving to me is an excessiveness. That's how I see it. Desires are okay. Even a desire, when you having a desire is not a bad thing, but if you're so attached to it and you're attached to the outcome and it has to be this way and that, then it's different. That's how I'm seeing it.
Okay, thank you, Shanti.
You're welcome.
Jamshed, do you mind rephrase your question, because I didn't catch it the first time around?
Well, my question was that without craving, there would not be any inventions created by man to improve life. If I let go of any craving, then I would become lazy. Why go to work? Just not crave anything at all. And so I have struggled with that. And that's why I asked for clarification.
Oh, okay, thank you. So without desire, why do anything?
Right. Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. Why? If you don't have a desire to improve it, why invent the cotton gin? Why invent the COVID vaccine? It's a craving to not get sick. But then
It's a desire for wellness. How about that?
right, but even the word desire has been used before in the when describing the Four Noble Truths. So it's just, perhaps I'm just off base, but that's what I was struggling with.
Yeah, I think they're talking about.
I think that the craving in this Buddha meaning that the selflessness for something that you want to do it for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
Do something for other or for the society,
Mm-hmm.
I to your suffering.
I agree with that. Yes. When it's a selfish endeavor, as opposed to improving the society, humans, humanity, for humanity's purpose.
Yeah, and I want to say that what I think, in my opinion, what it's saying here is an obsession with something. And that obsession or attachment is, if I don't have this, then I'm not going to be okay. And so
Mhm.
I'm lived in a deep longing, and that longing always takes me away from the present moment. And I think that there is a misunderstanding about what enlightenment is about, because if you look at people that really don't have craving and that are leaders like Mother Teresa or Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta, these people take a lot of action. They teach people and they do stuff, but they don't exist in craving or obsession. But we are called by spirit to do things. And I think that a lot of what's done is done through us. It's like the invention comes through somebody. It's not like somebody's just mad, crazy to invent something. They have this idea that comes through spirit that says, this would be nice. Let's do this. It's a reaction from inside, not from egoic endeavor, as Shanti said.
And I think that comes also with discernment, when you know when it's ego versus spirit talking to you, when it's and you have to be so in alignment to be able to discern the difference, right? Because some of this. So anyway, yeah.
All right, thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
I want to make a comment about, since I joined the conversation. I want to look at it from an internal energy point of view. When you're craving, you will feel the energy being drained.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one way to look at it. The more you crave, the more you feel that you are being drained. Okay, so it doesn't have to be deal with the mind itself. Just
That's a good
just
one. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Wu.
yes. Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the fourth essay, Fail Today, Succeed Tomorrow. And from the voice, learn that no efforts, not the smallest, whether in the right or wrong direction, can vanish from the world of causes. And the author says that the bare verse obviously refers to karma, that unseen or unknown law, which adjusts wisely and intelligently and equitably each effect to its cause, tracing the later back to its producer. And then it goes on to say that karma has been described as an unerring law which adjusts cause to effect on the physical, mental, and spiritual planes. That harsh words and selfish actions bear their fruit just as surely as do those motivated by kindness and altruism. So, the knowledge of karma allows us to persevere, that we know that we are engaged in the work of many lifetimes, that causes that we set in motion do not always reach our resolution within one lifetime, and that also karma creates opportunities or lack of it. And that for disciples who make the most of their present opportunities, we even have even greater opportunities for service in the future. And that those who fail to take advantage of the existing opportunities will find them scarce and non-existent in their next incarnation. So it talks about this parable of talents that can be found in the Bible, Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 to 30. And in this parable, 3 servants are given a sum of money to invest. And the first 2 servants invested the money well, and they got good returns on those monies invested. Whereas the 3rd servant said that he knows the master to reap where he hasn't sown. And because of that, that 3rd servant didn't want to lose the money, so he went and buried the money. So when the master came and wanted the money, he just went and dug the money out and gave it back to the master. And he said that the master was not really happy with this person who just went and buried the money and didn't invest in it. So the message is that whatever talents we have, we should use them. And don't bury your talents. I mean, are there any other comments on this parable? Okay, let's move on to so all of us know that normally failures test us a lot. And that anytime we want to achieve something worthwhile in life, we risk failing. And that there are a whole lot of remarkable people who have succeeded in life after having experienced bitter taste of defeat. Thomas Edison basically invented a light bulb after more than 1,000 experiments. And there's a story that even went on to say that a journalist asked him, how did you feel about failing all this time? He said, no, I didn't fail. I only find 1,000 ways for the thing not to work. So in a spiritual life, failure is a distinct possibility. Success is not guaranteed, at least not in the short run. We may fail, but we should not give up. In the Light of the Path, part 2, verse 18, it says, the knowledge which is now yours is only yours because your soul has become one with all pure souls and of the innermost. It is a trust vested in you by the Most High. Betray it, misuse your knowledge, or neglect it. It is possible even now for you to fall from the high estate you have attained, and that great ones fall back, even from the threshold, unable to sustain the weight of their responsibilities, unable to pass on. So there are some words of inspiration from Blavatsky, who said, if you have tried and failed, O dauntless fighter, yet lose not courage, fight on, and to the charge return again and yet again. So what can we learn from failures in our lives?
Not to do it again.
Learn from it and try something else, but get up and go. I like to use the analogy of a baby trying to walk for the first time. If it falls, it doesn't just stay on the ground. The baby tries and tries again and again. And if the baby didn't try to walk until it learns, I guess none of us will be walking today. We were all babies at one time and we grew, we learned how to walk, right? We didn't stop the first time we fell. But somehow as adults, when we fail, we fear, and then we don't want to try again. We don't want to try again. And that kind of sticks as fear, not to move forward and try again.
Any
I
other
also-
comments? Yeah, Anne, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and looking at this material, I think it also behooves us to look at the context in which this was written. HPB was maligned at every turn. She had money difficulties. I mean, she at one point even said that she would resign from the Theosophical Society if that would be helpful to the society, because she did not want her name to tarnish anything. So she was very oppressed. I mean, she was out there. The Christian community was against her. Everybody was against her. And I think a lot of this was written to inspire her. It was written out of her own perspective. And so I think it's a little, it's easy to take some of this material and say, oh gosh, we better use our talents or we're not good people. Oh gosh, we better perform or we're not okay. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have quit then. But to look at what she was saying, and she's encouraging us to move beyond what a lot of times are barriers, which are humans that block our way all the time.
I put this picture here of this bridge because in engineering, they study why things fail, so that from the knowledge of why things fail, they can improve and they don't do the same thing in future. So there's a whole lot of studies on, why does this fail? Why does this fail? What should we do? What can we do better next time so that this doesn't fail? So the next essay is on a special form of service. And it's the voice passage is, give light and comfort to the toiling pilgrim and seek out him who knows still less than thou. So it goes on to say that many members of the TS devote part of their time and money and to help people. And this is commendable. However, there's another form of service which Theosophists can deliver. So in the key of the Theosophy, HPB wrote, we believe in relieving the starvation of the soul as much, if not more, than the emptiness of the stomach. So the author goes on to say that the truth of Theosophy has a power to change people's lives. But some Theosophists demur at the thought of teaching others, perhaps out of modesty, shyness, or lack of confidence. To those gentle souls, the voice says, seek out him who knows still less than thou. And then in the Mahatma letters, it goes on to say that the chief object of the TS is not so much to gratify individual aspirations as to serve our fellow human beings. And then one of the former president of the Theosophical Society, C. Jadasar, said, if each member will keep in mind that he is a member in order to call out the hidden light in all his fellow men, he will not only strengthen his society, but find that there's born within him greater strength to bear the difficulties of his own karma, and also the fuller light to see the way towards the unfoldment of the Godhead within him. So HPB said, we believe in relieving the starvation of the soul as much, if not more, than the emptiness of the stomach. And this this writing is controversial. So anyway, what do you think about this statement?
Is she asking us to be missionaries for theosophy?
Missionary, we should give light, but not missionaries as from the Christian point of view. You don't have to force things on the people's throat. But if somebody asks and he needs light, we should offer the light. Any other comments about this words from HPV?
I feel that it is coming back to what we were discussing earlier about compassion. Compassion for others is only going to strengthen a positive energy in everything involved.
Okay, thank you. Vidya? Oh. Okay, let's move on then. The fifth essay is on the audience vertical ascent. The path is one for all. The means to reach the goal must vary with the pilgrims. Then it goes on to say the mass of humanity is traversing this protracted circuitous road, unaware that it extends beyond the span of a single lifetime. They live in what the voice of the silent dupes the hall of sorrow, hoping to avoid pain and suffering while seeking whatever pleasures the world may afford. And as Anibi-san puts it, they walk not straight onwards as though intent on business, but wander hither and hither like children running after a blossom here and chasing a butterfly there. And then Anibi-san goes on to say that there are rare souls who long ago raised their eyes from the dusty path below to see the luminous destination at the top of the mountain. Not content to trod along with the masses, they chose the more difficult path, the path of direct ascent, and also known as the path of hastened unfoldment. Then she went on to say that the winding path is safer, but interminable. The vertical ascent is quicker, but perilous. So the question is, why should we commit to this path of hastened unfoldment?
Well, I think it makes the final destination much more worthwhile. And you have more gratefulness and appreciation once you hit that final destination.
Any additional comments?
Isn't there saying something like go big or don't go at all? And, you know, and the Bible in Corinthians, we hear about the lukewarm churches. I mean, I think Jesus says, I'd rather for you to be wrong and passionate than to just be lukewarm and namby-pamby. And it also says that if we take if we take the safe path, there are just endless different offshoots we can go on. that take us away from where we're going. Because if we're going to the top of the mountain, we don't need to stop in every village and go visit the goats and the cows. We need to go on about our business and go to the top of the mountain.
Right. And I think that also brings it to focusing on our path. So if we're focus is really like laser focus, right? But to be laser focused is not an easy task with so many distractions in our environment, not to mention social media, the news, this and then that. And as we are seekers, if we're seeking to go up the mountain, how can we stay focused, laser focused?
And also the adepts who have gone before us, you know, this some of them stay behind to assist us. So as we commit to this path of hastened unfoldment, then we can be more helpful to our fellow human beings. Okay, the next essay is compassion is more than a virtue. So the verse 300 says, compassion is not an attribute, it's the law of laws, eternal harmony. So the author said that from the dictionary, defines attribute as a quality or character ascribed to a person or a thing. However, the voice of silence considers compassion as it is a law, it is the law of laws, eternal harmony. So in a sense, this statement elevates compassion beyond the category of mere attributes. Then he goes on to say that it is hard for us to imagine anybody referring to patience or tolerance or forgiveness as laws. So he gave his understanding of that verse, that when an aspirant earnestly begins to live their spiritual life, refashioning the lower self into an instrument of the higher, a fundamental change in outlook takes place. The maya of a separate self becomes an illusion, while the unity of all life becomes real and vivid. No longer can the sufferings of others be ignored. A sense of interconnectedness with all sentient beings gives birth to the universal sense of compassion. As a result, one can no more stem the flow of compassion that nullifies the law of gravity. So any additional comments on this? Compassion is no attribute. It is a law of laws, eternal harmony.
Well, now I'm gonna just want to add something, and that is that when we think about compassion, and in any of these characteristics, there's two sides to compassion. One is a transactional compassion, where we might look at someone and judge them, and then we make the choice to actively look at compassion. It's like, oh, I'm judging somebody, but I'm going to change this, and this is transactional. I'm going to look at what they're doing. And then the other side of compassion is what I think they're talking about, this universal law, this transpersonal compassion that's the ground of all being. And often we get the same thing with gratitude. We get the transpersonal, transcendent, infinite intelligence kind of compassion mixed up with transactional compassion. Because if I say, how can I be more compassionate? How can I serve others? That's transactional compassion, just versus infinite compassion. And she, I believe, is talking about infinite compassion.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the last essay. Hack from the deep, unfathomable vortex of that golden light in which the victor bathes, all nature's wordless voice in thousand tones arise to proclaim, joy unto ye, O men of Marble. A pilgrim has returned back from the other shore. A new Ahan is born, peace to all beings. So this celebration is a joyous tribute to the pilgrim who, after entering the stream of many lifetimes ago, have now completed a long and arduous journey to become a Buddha. But then rather than bask in the ocean of knowledge as nirvana, or sometimes called, this pilgrim has chosen to remain in the world as Buddha of compassion, out of infinite compassion for all sentient beings. Jeffrey Hudson gave a more graphic description of this, that when the time of preparation, the candidate is made to face adverse incidents of this life and the intense humiliation and hurt that results. It might be like a process of being flayed alive, since the sense of personal guilt for past errors and faults in the spiritual awakened ego is naturally so strong. This process is invoked by the candidate himself, and consequently, he might be prepared for the painful stripping away of his past and its results, particularly the psychological ones. And then in the voice and the light on the path, it says, part 1, verse 21, the opening of the bloom is a glorious moment when the perception awakes. With it comes confidence, knowledge, certainty. The pulse of the soul is a moment of wonder, and the next moment of satisfaction. That is silence. Know, O disciple, that those who have passed through the silence and felt its peace and retained its strength, they long that you shall pass through it also. So one of Blavatsky's teachers offered a note of encouragement to a particular disciple, short and to the point. The advice of that teacher remains timeless and applies to aspiring pilgrims of any time and place. We have one word for all aspirants: try. So as a summary of the essays, the first is that I've heard, we are seekers, we are not experts. O ignorant disciple, seek knowledge and wisdom. The human condition, the suffering. Fail today, succeed tomorrow, trust in the law of karma and reincarnation, and never give up. Special form of service, give light. The audience vertical ascent talks about hastened versus unhastened unfoldment. Compassion is more than a virtue. Our essence is compassion. A pilgrim has returned. The glorious celebration, there's a glorious celebration at the end. So, are there comments, questions that anybody would like to?
John, can you go back to the previous slide and keep that list up there? Thank you. So I'd like to go back to number 3.
So these are just my summary. It's
I
nothing
love
more
it.
than
I love your summary. So that's some reference to what I'm going to say. So I'd like to go back to number 3, when it says there's suffering, gives an impression we all have to suffer. But to realize we cause our own suffering from when we cause our own suffering when we go into extremes of things, and rather than staying in balance, it is the suffering is from within. Nothing outside of us is causing our internal suffering. So it's a choice then, really, another mindset thing. And we can bring things into balance, and of course that what we are in control of. When we suffer is when we try to control, we judge, we have attachments and resentments. That's what causes our suffering. Any thoughts on that? Anybody else?
But I mean, one of our loved ones might pass away. The grief is all suffering.
Of course, we allow. It's not suffering. That's a word that I don't like to use. It is not suffering. Grief is not suffering. Grief is not a bad thing. We give ourselves permission to grieve, and it's an emotion that's passing through.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this distinction between grief and suffering, and the way we talk about suffering now, as many of you probably know, I devised a whole philosophy called easyosophy, which is about eliminating ego-driven struggle and suffering. But Buddha himself said, we will suffer. He said, suffering is not necessary, but we will love. And when we lose, we will suffer. And so he talks about grief as suffering. So, just wanted, and of course, then there's the whole big genre of just ego-driven struggle and suffering, and making a distinction between grief and suffering, and what we're at choice about, and what we don't want to shut down.
Well, I want to make a comment on that.
Sure.
There's a difference between grief and grief. You can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Suffering, you actually go through the process already, linking up to the previous grief. So that's why it's important to feel grief, but you don't have to keep going on with it. And that's the way I see it. That's why in some way, when you feel grief, you feel the energy of grief. You don't put any mental part on it. And that's the best way to me. To me, that's the best way to deal with any emotion. You feel it. I know it sounds simple, but
it takes work. I agree with you, Dr. Wu. It takes internal work, and that's the work
right.
we need to do, and allow the energy to pass through, and give yourself time, give yourself permission to allow that to pass through. The reason we suffer is we are bringing all the past into it, and blah blah, and the ego stuff, and we're so attached to it, we're not ready to let go. But all these emotions are there for us to experience, not good, bad, right, or wrong.
Yeah, Karen, I want to mention one more thing. Go back to Shanti's comment on the child keep walking. The reason they can do that because they don't have conditioning. They don't have the rational mind to condition them. So the question is, how do we get back to that state of no conditioning? To me, it's just, I usually use the word complex. When you react, you activate the mind, and then you form a complex that will last with you forever. So the question is, how do you get rid of it? So if you can get rid of that, that means that means you automatically keep trying. So I think that's why we are fear. When Shanti were talking about fear, we procrastinate when we are fearful, right? So basically, that's the key. The question is simple enough. I don't know. Again, it's not simple thing, but I feel that there is more than the reasoning and mind to do it. You have to put in energy too.
And in addition to that, I see, at least myself, as I was talking before, a baby in the spiritual path. As a baby in the spiritual path, I will keep falling. I will keep falling, but I'm going to get up and try again. I'm going to get up and try. I'm going to get up and try. I will fall. I will have judgment. I will get angry. I will be sad. But how long do I stay in those emotions? And how fast can I pass through it and feel it and allow myself and be compassionate with myself and move on? That is the baby part.
So I think in some ways important to,
Shanti and Dr. Wu. For me,
Yes.
the suffering is the process of our evolution. Everybody we need to learn. The goal for we coming to become a better. So we have to learn the suffering to feel. That's why we can serve. Now, at the last slide that John put, is I try, but I will add one more. Don't give up.
Persevere.
So
I completely agree as well with Santi's feedback. It's a state of mind. To me, suffering is a state of mind that is induced by ignorance. So that's why we benefit a lot with theosophy. With theosophy, we learn lots of the laws of nature. For example, the law of karma. Take, for example, for the law of karma, if you consider the state of mind of perspective of two different persons, one that knows theosophy with the law of karma and one that does not, imagine the picture of the flood that with the hurricane and so on. The person without that knowledge, that's ignorant of the law of karma, will consider that it's suffering. But the state of mind of theosophists who know the law of karma know that they would rejoice in that, because that is the karma that you receive. That's a burden that you have lived off from your past. So that is an opportunity, in their view, in their perspective, that's an opportunity to pay off that debt that they have induced in previous incarnation. So to them, it's a joyful event and not so much a painful event. So to me, everything is driven by ignorance. So the more that we can shed the light and the more wisdom that we can pass on to other seeker, that's how we eliminate that ignorance and help the overall evolution of humanity. That's it. Sorry for cutting you off, John.
no, I think it's, I don't have anything to say. I was going to say that, I mean, all of us in Houston here in January, we experienced a severe cold, and that is suffering. We went through several days without any electricity, no heating, at least for some of us. And you never know, what is going to come up next year, what type of disasters are going to happen. So to me, life is suffering.
So those are external. We cannot control external circumstances. External circumstances will always happen. But we also have internal. So external versus internal.
Okay.
Sometimes, okay, that we cannot control, but what we can control is the internal. We cause our own internal suffering. We have to accept the fact, right? Even the external suffering, yes, the freeze came, there's earthquake and freeze and flooding. We have no control of nature, but we can change our perspective even to the freeze. how did the mind take it? How did individual minds take it? Okay, this too shall pass. Nothing lasts forever. This too shall pass, and we just go through it. It's how the mind eventually takes it and cause an internal suffering. It's the perspective of how you see things, how
Yeah,
we internalize things. If you want to internalize a suffering, then your life will be that.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. That's it.
Yeah, I would rephrase John's saying that life is suffering. I would rephrase it to something more along the line of life isn't perfect. Because what happened is our spirit live in a realm where it's perfect. It's not
Yes.
manifested, right? It's unmanifest. The moment that life manifests itself, it's gonna be imperfect. It is the way of truth. That is the way it is. So yeah, life isn't perfect, but I don't agree that life is completely suffering. Life has good and bad, and life isn't perfect always like what we want it to be. For example, if you were to take the picture, you always want to take the picture of the good stuff, right? The good times. And you take the, people need to smile, right? Cheese, 1, 2, 3, cheese, so you can take that picture. But in reality, that's not life. That isn't that perfect picture that you take and that you cherish, throughout your life. Life is about the good and the bad. But life isn't perfect. We are here to learn, how to live that life and make the best of it. That's all.
Yeah, and you may remember, but my whole philosophy is easyosophy. And so to change the word from suffering to hard, and that is, I say, is life hard? Everybody says, oh, yes, life is hard. But I said, but is it hard all the time? Yes, life is hard, but it's not hard all the time. And so, if we take a stand in the position that life is hard or life is suffering, then we look through those lens. And so life, as Shanti said, life is really an interpretation. There are times that are very extremely difficult. And that's why I think we made the distinction between real suffering and ego-driven suffering. Real suffering is when our parents die, when our favorite dog dies and everything, but ego-driven suffering is when we have to get up every morning at 6 o'clock for 10 years and we're still suffering about it. We can quit our job or we can quit suffering about it, because that's ego-driven suffering. But there are millions of people that get up every morning and suffer because they have to get up, and that's ego-driven suffering. So life is hard, but it's not hard all the time. And the other thing is that the other belief is that we can never change it. And so that solidifies our position of being a victim. This is like,
Yes.
I've always got to be hyper vigilant and protect myself from the ills of the world. And that's a very life-denying space and place to be.
Thank you, Anne, for that. Because when we use these words, we have this subconscious belief that we are victims of all of this. So instead of being a victim, how can we feel empowered? What is a more empowering way? So when we have a freeze or an earthquake, it's, oh my God, I'm suffering. This is a suffering. I said, how about changing that and saying, okay, what's the opportunity here? What is the opportunity? If I am not caught in this freeze or flood, or how can I help my fellow human beings? What can I do? And everybody came together to help one another. Everybody was checking on each other. Do you have heat? Do you have water? Okay, I have heat. Do you want to come over? Those kind of humanitarian things happen. Everybody was helping each other. What is the opportunity? So it's really a change in perspective.
Yeah, it's not denial.
It's not
just
denial.
choosing
Yeah.
to look in a different direction.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like I'm freezing and I don't like it, but yet, can I move home? This is an inconvenience. Can I move home?
How can I do it differently? I had to sit in my car to charge my phone and feel warm. Okay, I'm going to sit in my car. I've never done it, but I had to switch gears, or we have to switch gears, right? And so, yeah,
And this doesn't in any way invalidate your perspective, John. You've got your own perspective and you can live it. You know, it's perfect for you to have it that way. We're just having it a different way and saying, well, there is a different way to look at that. But Shanti and I are not experts.
We're not. Thank you. We're not experts.
Yeah, we're not experts.
We're not experts.
We're making alternative suggestions of a viewpoint.
It was just easier for me to live life that way when I'm in this situation. It's like, okay, what is the opportunity here? What can I do? It makes up my life, someone's life easier. Always, what can I do?
I like to jump in here, and although I am agreeing with everything you ladies are saying and things, unfortunately, there is some horrible suffering going on in the world. I think it's very easy for all of us sitting here in our homes, you know, suffering with having to get up early and pay bills, or, you know, sick parents or whatever. There is a lot of people suffering in the world. And I don't know if, you know, what we, you know, discussed today was necessarily talking about groups of people as more as individually. But sadly, there are a lot of people suffering in different parts of the world. And I think that needs to be recognized as well. Like I said, it's all easy for us to say here, having the ability to have the internet and things and being able to connect like this, which is wonderful. There is a lot of suffering going on, and I don't think any of us are ignoring it, but I do think it needs to be brought to light as well.
So Jennifer, I don't know if you remember, that was my first question when we talked about compassion. I mean, it's easy to feel compassion for yourself and your family, the ones that you see, but there is suffering around. So how do we feel compassionate for the greater humanity of people who are suffering? They're suffering, you know, we realize that. I think as Josephus, we do realize it. And I think John's answer was, if we pray, we send light. Oh, if we can help, we help. That's what that was my very first question. I mean, it's easy to see what's right in front of our eyes, but just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. We know it's happening. But what
I don't know where I had heard, I don't know if it was Portugal or somewhere, but you know, they were having issues with immigration and people coming in and people that don't have homes. You know, looking for a better life somewhere else, you know, taking that arduous path up that mountain, you know, that picture that we saw earlier. And like I said, I'm not really sure what my point is. You know, personally, yes, my life hasn't been suffering too much lately, but to deny that there's other people, countless other people suffering in the world, I think is, I don't know. I just think it needs to be brought to light that there is some, you know, why we, you know, maybe it was our karma that we're able to sit here and connect like this and have an internet and have the abilities and skills and have the situation, you know, maybe it's our past lives that brought us to be able to have our gifts that we have now. There still are people suffering in other areas that, you know.
We also have to remember we are all souls here that chose to come into this earth life to experience life. We all have our soul purpose to learn whatever we need to learn. And as Trid brought, we also have a spirit. We all are spirit beings, divine spirit beings. So the soul is here to learn and experience, but the spirit is here to guide us. So the soul and the spirit will guide us, but the spirit will not interfere with our soul contract. We have a choice to call our spirit to guide us and to lead us in, move us in the direction of our highest good and the best possible outcome. But if we don't call upon help, then that is my belief. And so we all have, and we cannot interfere, the soul will not interfere in our soul contract, we cannot interfere in other people's soul journey. We can
Mhm.
help if they ask for help. We cannot force help. We pray for people. We do, and as John mentioned, we do the best we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to mention, Jennifer, I think you bring up an excellent point, and that's why in the introductions to several of my books, I always say, I want to acknowledge the real suffering in the world. I want to acknowledge the people that are starving, that are dying, that have no water, that have rampant disease. I acknowledge that that is true. And I don't want anyone to take what I'm offering this book as something cavalier and that pushes that aside. But what I do want to say is, one way of honoring other people is if I don't need to secondhand suffer. In other words, if I have a good life, I don't need to suffer because they have. I need to honor what I have. They're wanting what I have. I don't need to be suffering about what they have. And then the other aspect is the book that I'm reading, they're not going to be reading. That's not the audience I'm hitting to. And the people that are suffering are not on this call. And so even though we can acknowledge them, they're not here. And they're not reading my book that says you can change your mind, you can change the world, you can take action, you can rest, you can do all these things. They're not even there. You know, when somebody's out hunting for food every day, they're not sitting around reading a book, and they don't need a positive attitude. That's not what they need.
Right.
I'm saying, and that is not who I'm offering it to. And I apologize for anyone that might be in that space that is reading my book, because that is not what I'm trying to do.
And when people are in survival mode, it's hard to be in any other mode because they're looking for the next food, where their food's coming from, or where, how they're going to pay their rent, right? There's a lot of people I realize are in survival mode, even with this COVID thing, how it has hit, right?
Yeah, there's a saying that I really like that people sometimes will put at the end of their email. It's about how to alleviate suffering. Leave things better than the way you found it.
And even when we encounter people, leave them in a better space than when we met them, right? It's always leaving them in a better space. If you find someone who's depressed or sad, and lightening them up, I mean, that you've done that purpose is lightening them up, and every little thing that we do to lighten or brighten someone's day is, you've done that part. I mean, I love whales, but I can't go. I mean, I don't have the energy to go save whales right now, right? Or where your energy meets and what you can do.
And I want to add one more thing, that we need to have the devotion, trust what we have. Remember that whatever we suffer in this world is only that the few that we have to give back the karma. We need to trust the law of karma and reincarnation. Now, what we suffer right now, compared with what we did from the past, that's nothing. We need to learn.
Yeah, Timothy.
Say that again, John.
I said, Timothy, is he willing to shed some light on any of this?
Well, hello. I got here late. Can you hear?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I was busy earlier and finally got a chance to hop on. I got a glimpse of what you guys were saying in the past 15 minutes about suffering. Are we still talking about theosophy? Or are we talking, or we are just talking about individual point of view?
Well, the third essay says human condition and that life is suffering. So
What's the difference? We are trying to apply theosophy, to our personal lives. That's what we're talking about. How do we apply what we learn into our personal lives?
Yeah, I hear the word suffering a lot, but the last one was talking about was when he's mentioning about karma. And that has to be factored in. Suffering is blessed. It is blessing. It is an opportunity. It is a playground for the soul to grow.
Exactly. Yep.
If you don't have that, and you keep interpreting that which you experience in as harsh into like a suffering perspective, then you're missing out why you go and do this. You either grow one or two way. You grow your personal ego or you grow your spirit. You suffering, which means you're going through a negative. That break down the personality and that give the spirit that's inside, trapped inside this personality, an opportunity to break through, burst through that vulnerable, which you call suffering. So anytime you're going through a bad time, it is bad for the personality, but it is super good for the spirit.
An
Spirit,
opportunity. Yeah.
the spirit had the opportunity to get out, burst out of this hole, that pinhole, that an opportunity of a lifetime to get out and be free. Through this experience that you call suffering, it is golden opportunity for the spirit. It is bad, very bad for the personality that you build up. So either which way are you growing? If you go through life and you have no suffering, you have no harsh time, good time all the time, the only thing that growing is your personality. Your spirit stay stagnant because it doesn't have a chance to grow, to burst out of this personality that it, that trap itself in it. So you talk about suffering. Another point that Van pointed out is karma. You have to factor it in. How do you know that they are not, karma is not working out is, for that individual? That that individual have caused or that group have caused disharmony in the past. Now they are reharmonizing it through this process of called karma. They put back the harmony, and what they are doing. You seeing them as suffering, you feel bad for them. You and I, at some point in the past, have gone through all of that to arrive to the point where we are now. How do you know that we've not already been through hard time, horrible time in the past already? So everything has its place. They going through what they need to go through. You are going through what you need to go through. And nothing stay put. Their suffering will go away when the karma worked out for them. When they work out their karma for them, or they create more karma, then get more suffering. So we talk about suffering, but we leave out the aspect without the law of karma, leave out the law of harmony. We are at a loss. We see things at a perspective. Now our perspective become random and have no direction of why, how, and why, and why. And then we start asking, why are these people suffering? Yeah, there's a reason why that is. It's not suffering. They're going through the time that they reharmonizing what they have disharmonized in the past. So another point that I heard that when I came in, perfection. Who among us, anybody that have ever lived in the past until now and into the future have seen perfection? We say this is not perfect. Do we really know what perfect is? I mean, are we setting a standard? We look up standard, we go to this chart, this point is called perfection. How do we know what is perfection? We don't know what is perfection. Even the highest being going through right now, when it look down, it say that we are behind. When the highest being right now look up, they're way behind. So where is the point of perfection? There's no such thing as point of perfection in the teaching of theosophy, because evolution is always changing. It's always expanding. If you reach a point where you say this is perfection, you are dead. You stop. There's no room to grow for you anymore. You just set yourself at a dead end. So that's theosophy. I don't know, but you throw in perfection in a personal point of view, comparing to some kind of standardized as a social, the society have set out for us to compare, or some other being have set out for us to compare. This is perfection. Then that's not theosophy. That you just put the stop to evolution. You see, this year you see a car coming out, Tesla coming out with a new car. You think that's going to stop there next year or the year after? There's always room to grow, because there's never perfection. It's always growing, expanding. The condition around us always changing. We cannot have a perfection in an always changing environment. And that gives us an opportunity to grow, because if we move, our consciousness grow bigger and bigger. The consciousness is growing from elemental to mineral to plant kingdom, to the animal kingdom, to the animal human kingdom. All of this is expanding of consciousness. We are at the level where our consciousness knows this much.
So
That's all I
Vidya,
could comment on.
okay, well, thank you very much, Timothy. Vidya, you have some comments to make on these essays?
No.
I want to make a comment on the suffering and the compassion you're talking about. One of the key things of, we talk about compassion. So I will bring up another term called sympathy. Okay. Compassion is energy. Sympathy is ego. Okay, so I think, if you approach the things from this point of view of compassion, if you're really compassionate, you will do something. If you only come from sympathy, it's more likely that you're not going to do much, because you are drained by the energy already. Because sympathy comes from ego, then you will really drain your energy. So that my comment is to make sure that you make the distinction of it. Otherwise, then you just keep spiral down into more suffering for yourself and not helping the others. But that's my comment.
And I just want to say that I do make that distinction myself between suffering, between compassion and sympathy. To me, compassion does not shut our action off. It's just that I think a lot of people take action from sympathy, and that is, I have so much and I have so much knowledge and I'm so smart, I'm going to help you out. And it feeds the ego. And I think I think that a lot of the whole Christian philosophy has been to help people out from a position of sympathy, and I'm better than you are, and we'll teach you and we'll take you along. But compassion is when we walk with others and say, I could be just like this if the same situation occurred, and I'm not going to look down on you and try to help you out. I see you as a whole person, and let's walk together. And I acknowledge your suffering. And I think that's the distinction between sympathy and compassion. I don't think sympathy keeps people from action. I think it maybe make them jump faster, because we get to have that idea of ourselves as, I am one who helps. I am a wonderful person. I'm so nice. I'm so sweet. I'm so good. And that, so I am sympathy, and I feel sorry for that person. And we don't, to use Shanti's word, we don't empower people when we have sympathy, but compassion empowers people when we walk with them.
Well, I think no, I totally agree with you. But I think if you come from sympathy, you sometimes overact.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's a danger. But you come from compassion, you won't be overact. You will be the kind of glide along with whatever you need to do. I think that's the, okay. So I think the activism action is good, but overacting is not good. Activism to the extreme sometimes actually drain other people's energy and your energy. So I think that's I
Absolutely.
totally agree with you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So at the end, it all boils down to energy. Feel your energy, feel how it is when you are going out there to help. Am I helping out of the ego base or compassion base? Whether it's love or ego, you got to feel into it. If it doesn't feel right, you know where it is. All energy.
Yeah. Because if you overact, you basically you can feel the energy being drained. So one way to distinguish it, just kind of develop the energy sensitivity is that you are from a point of compassion or from a point of sympathy. Sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish rationally. If you use your mind to do it, you can't really do it.
Exactly. You need to get rid of the analytical mind. Go in and feel into it. It's your feeling, and your body talks to you. Your body will tell you.
Right.
And that takes work. That's the inner work we need to do. It's the inner work.
That's why I sometimes say that you have to make the distinction between reacting and feeling. They are not the same. Okay, so I think this is one of the key things. If you can distinguish them, then you will not have much conditioning longer in the future.
And I think in yogic terms, they use, I think last week or something, we use the word discern. How can we discern, right?
And I want to speak to the idea of, is this theosophy? And that is that one of the things, and one of the reasons that I joined theosophy is because it says we have no definite belief that we believe. We're not a fundamentalist. It's like Blavatsky said it, that's the end. That's a fundamental closed belief. Blavatsky said, let's look out at scientific, what's going on in philosophy, what's going on in science. It says, let's look at the perennial, let's look at everything. Let's be open-minded. And that's what I love about theosophy, because it tells me that I can bring everything kind of into this one overarching thing of, the wisdom of this cosmic force that we're all playing in. And so it's not a close, there's not a theosophy teaching. Theosophy is a concept or overarching principle in which there are many things that have been said, but we're invited to explore and examine, never to take those as the absolute truth, because there is no absolute truth. Blavatsky was doing just what we're doing. She was theoretically bringing down some things. She was bringing down some things for the masters. Every word that she spoke wasn't like the absolute truth. A lot of it had, or some of it had to do with her with her perception, what she was going through. And I mean, she was very human too. And, not everything that dropped out of her mouth was gospel, but much of her stuff was extreme wisdom. And we honor that and we examine that. So I just want to say that theosophy is not a fundamentalist religion in which everything that Blavatsky said is the absolute truth. And if we vary from that that we've done something wrong, that's the fundamentalist perspective. And I just want to bring that up.
I think that holds true for just not the philosophical studies we do, but anything that refers to it, like when we read the Bible or what Buddha says or whatever. We have to use our own, what, like Anne was saying, what is science saying? How does the mind work, and all of that, bringing, and how does it apply to your own life, and bringing in a grander perspective, and not just take everything word for word, right? Everything in content and context. What is the content? What is the context?
In the teaching of Theosophy, Master KH and Blavatsky at some point have pointed out that we are operate in a finite mind, and Theosophy has never been taught up until this point, because Theosophy is outside the realm of intelligence. You are using intelligence as a tool to process this that they're trying to show, which you are not there yet. You and I, all of us, we are operate in the intellectual realm, and the whole truth is outside, beyond the intellectual realm. You have to move past the intellectual realm into the intuition realm to really get a glimpse of this whole truth. So far that we are studying something that is very basic and below, and not even in Theosophy. Blavatsky at one point have pointed out that Theosophy itself is outside the realm of intellect, and it cannot be taught using thinking process. Thinking process is a step ladder that you step on one step at a time to arrive to the point where you can just assimilate into intuition. And then from that point forward, from intuition forward, you see more of the teaching of Theosophy. So you see, doesn't matter how we say it and we look at it, we're still using thinking as a tool to process this knowledge. So we are very finite and limited, and what we see and what we say are from the limited point of view.
Yeah, go beyond the five senses. Go beyond what we can see, hear, smell, touch, because that's where, go beyond, go into the unknown, and be brave to go into the unknown and cross that veil and see what's there. I think most of us do that when we do a meditation and all that. Some have had a glimpse of what's there, and in our personal experiences, I'm sure we've all had glimpses of that, but being more in that space than in this finite space and learning from that. And I'm sure you can relate to that.
Yes, I've got a little dog running around in here that takes my attention sometimes. I'm grand dog sitting, and so I have this little dog running back and forth, getting things off the floor that I didn't get off. It's like just walks through with a pen in his mouth, in our mouth, a pound. It's like, no.
Good conversation though, thank you. Good study, I really enjoyed it.
Very
Yeah, I'd
well
like to thank
organized.
John. Yeah, John, your slide is a whole lot better than mine.
Oh, no, we don't do any comparisons.
There's no judgment here.
A whole lot better. I can tell you that.
Good job, John.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Yes, I like it.
Yes,
I may ask you to borrow before your slide so I can do the same format for my next one.
Okay. Okay.
And I didn't realize the next study, when I studied, it's on my birthday. I would have
Oh.
said no, but I committed, so I'm going to do it.
What is that date? What's it, is it, Auntie?
December 18.
Ah,
Yeah, John, when you have a chance, could you email that presentation to me so I can upload to our website as well, that I can tag it with the recording?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
What subject were you doing, Santi, on the 18th?
The Secret Doctrine, Chapter 12. Reflections on the Secret Doctrine.
Oh, this is from David Sabu's book.
Yeah, this is the
Okay.
last chapter.
Okay.
And Timothy, I want you to do some of those essays.
Who?
Timothy,
Yes.
Oh, you wouldn't want me to do any of those because I'll be calling you out. I'll be questioning you. I'll be checking on you. I'll be asking you questions. You'll be put on the spot. You wouldn't like me after that.
why?
Oh, we love you. We love you anyway. How many of you have actually read The Secret Doctrine? Any part of it? Any part
I
of
do.
it?
a little,
I do.
yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
do.
I'm going to stop the recording.